either as wisdom or as inquiry, but as a prerequisite, chachma, the truth is chachma is that ability of bitul, of self nullification, that it's not about what I have, what's in me, it's about God, it's about what's beyond me. That chachma is the prerequisite in order to be able to acquire this higher level of reverence, of yira. It comes from this level of chachma, from this level of bitul, of losing your sense of self. When you're in the presence of God, you're connecting with the reality of God. And when you're connecting with the reality of God in a genuine fashion, there's no room for yourself. Anything separate of God's existence is non-existent. Everything is part of God's existence. So when you use your chachma, which in the words of the Mishnah, a chacham, a wise person, is one who sees what's to come. So you're able to see with your spiritual lens, with your foresight, the reality of God, using your mind's eyes. So it's not seeing with your physical eyes, it's using your mindful eyes that you're able to see with your chachma, the godliness around. And from that level, you see only God's existence and how you are connected and part of God's existence. Okay, so that was just a little bit of a summary. And that would take us.
Can I actually interject?
Yeah, for sure. Are you able to hear Shira when she talks? Is that loud enough? Yeah.
Hi,
okay.
everyone.
Oh, no, you can't.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So the rabbi also talked about getting to yira or higher reverence through Torah study and performing mitzvot too. So just wanted to mention that because that really helped me to gain better understanding.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. So we will be on 555. The paragraph towards the top, maintaining. And let's pull up the Kindle as well. Here we go. Nowadays, it actually goes this way. Oh, it was all the way at the top, right there. Okay, maintaining all the way at the top of the page if you're looking at the Kindle. Otherwise, it's on 555 if you're looking in the book. Actually, now we'll just switch to the bottom of the page. Okay, the bottom of the page on the Kindle. Maintaining this consciousness represents the level of higher reverence. And that is why the verse states, look, reverence of God, other way, reverence of God, that's wisdom. That's a quote from Eov or Job. Again, the words are in Hebrew, Hein yirat Hashem hi chachma. That reverence of God, that's wisdom, chachma. Just as in the intro I was just giving you, that correlation between a chacham, a wise person, or chachma, wisdom itself, and the reverence of God. But the wording he used is look also, right? But let's see it inside. Because the path to higher reverence is through using your chachma. How do you get to a higher level of reverence? This level of yiras boshes, a feeling a shame in front of God, this level that you are totally feeling the godliness and the presence of God, that you don't even feel like a separate existence anymore. You're totally consumed in God's existence. How do you get to this level? It's through using your chachma, seeing what's beyond you, looking outside of you, that power of bittul. However, it's impossible to attain this higher reverence and chachma consciousness without first observing Torah and mitzvahs. So like I just gave in the intro, the lower level of yira is that you need to have that first in order to then get to a higher level of yira. You can't jump and bypass the lower and just go straight to the higher. There's an order, there's a process. While lower reverence is inspired by the greatness of God as manifested through the created worlds, higher reverence is an awareness of God as he transcends the worlds and voids their existence. Since you are a worldly creature, you can't fully tune into a light which transcends and voids your existence. We are creatures, we're existence. You can't tune into something that will make you not exist anymore, right? If you have all of God's light, it's transcending and perhaps even voiding your existence. So that's why to reach higher reverence, you need to first observe the mitzvahs, which are packets of otherworldly divine light, which are the 248 organs of the king. And that's a quote from Tikkun Zohar, which cause the light and life energy from God's transcendent will to be dressed in the world. So the mitzvahs will help lift your mind to a perspective where you can see beyond the limitations of this world, which is necessary for higher reverence. So just to explain this, the level of higher reverence is something that is really hard for any of us to attain, because it's almost a level that you're transcending your own self. You can't really do that. So the only way to reach this level is through the lower level of Yira. The lower level of Yira inspires you into Torah mitzvahs. So when you have that light, as the Zohar says, of the garments of the king, which are the 248 positive commands, the 248 positive mitzvahs, which bring this light of mitzvahs into you, it gives you the garments necessary and gives your mind the proper perspective to see beyond what you feel limited in this world, which is the prerequisite in order to be able to get to this higher reverence. So again, you have higher reverence, but the only way to get there is through the lower reverence, because once you have lower reverence, which inspires you into mitzvahs, it gives you the vitamins needed. It gives you the garments that you need in order to be able to see beyond what you're limited in. On our own, we're limited. We're finite beings. But when you have the power of mitzvahs, the light surrounding those mitzvahs, enclosed in you, it gives you the ability and the strength to be able to see beyond your limitations, which is how you could tap into this higher level of reverence. And as we learned in chapter 41, the observance, now we're in chapter 43, so 2 chapters ago, we learned that the observance of Torah and mitzvot, which is the key to higher reverence, requires the lower level, the superficial lower reverence. Lower reverence is an indirect requirement for higher reverence, because lower reverence is a prerequisite for proper mitzvah observance, and mitzvah observance is a prerequisite for higher reverence. So they're all related. Lower reverence is how you get to mitzvah observance, and mitzvah observance is how you get to the higher form of reverence. And just to summarize this point again, why is mitzvah observance the prerequisite in order to get to this higher form of reverence? Because at this place of higher form of reverence where you're feeling totally connected and you see the inherent godliness inside of you and inside of the world, you see godliness within the world. At that level, to be able to tap into that and to be in a state of reverence of God himself, not just of what God is doing in the world, God's greatness and God's nature and beauty in the world, but rather from God himself, this higher form of reverence, you could only attain by transcending your limitations. And you could only transcend your limitations by observing mitzvahs. And again, because mitzvahs garner this beautiful light with every mitzvah onto your soul. And when you have these lights illuminating your soul, it gives you the necessary garments to be able to transcend your own ego, to be able to transcend your own limits. So in order to get to this level of mitzvah observance, that comes through the lower level of reverence. So the pattern is, the process is, from lower reverence, it inspires you into mitzvah observance. And when you have mitzvah observance, it gives you the necessary lights and components needed in order to be able to then reach the next level of Yira, which is Yiras Boshes, or this higher level of Yira. And that's why the sages said, if there's no reverence, there's no chachma. If you don't first have lower reverence and observe the commandments, you won't be able to reach the consciousness of chachma and attain higher reverence. So I went a little quickly to finish section 2, because today's main topic will be on section 3. Section 3 now will introduce the incredible level of love. There's 2 types of love. In Hebrew, they're going to be known as ahava rabbah and ahavat olam. In this section, we're going to be focusing on the higher level of love, which is ahava rabbah, or great love. And it's going to be a beautiful discussion. But from chapter 41 up until this point, so the middle of chapter 43, the main topic has been about Yira. 2 levels of Yira, which we just introduced, the higher level of Yira's Boshes and the basic level of Yira. We discussed different meditations in that Yira. And we also discussed how to maintain that Yira mindset throughout our day. But now we're going to turn to the importance of the other wing of our relationship. We had the wing of our soaring bird. We had the wing of reverence, which is needed. But then one wing itself is not healthy. That's not enough. You need to have the balance of ava. You need to have the balance of love. But in this love, you have 2 levels of love, similar to the 2 levels of yira. You have a lower level of love, and you're going to have a higher. It seems like the Alter Rebbe is going to start with explaining the higher level of love, even though when it came to yira, the Alter Rebbe first started explaining the lower level. So just to see the pattern, if I understand correctly, let me just see over here. Yeah, interesting. He starts, I could give you my own thought. He starts with, let's just go through the pattern. He started with explaining the lower level of Yira, and then he went on to explain the higher level of Yira. You would think the pattern should be, he then starts with explaining the lower level of love, and then he continues to explain the higher level of love. My simple explanation, I think, of why he doesn't go in that order. Rather, he goes from the lower level of love, from the lower level of Yira to the higher level of Yira. He then continues to the higher level of love to the lower level of love. So he goes not in a 1-2 and then again a 1-2. He goes from 1-2 to 2 to 1. My thinking is once he's already on the higher level of Yira, he then segues to the higher level of love. He goes into the pattern of higher, in contrast with the higher Yira to higher Ava. And then he continues to explain the lower level. That's my thought of why. And that will take us to section 3, great love. Here we go. This concludes our discussion of reverence, which began in chapter 41. Now we turn to discuss the love for God, which is the second crucial component, or the second wing of the bird that will propel your mitzvahs heavenward. Now, with love of God, there are also 2 levels. A, the higher level of avarabba, which is great love. And B, a lower level of ahavas olam, which is worldly love.
Want some water?
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. The 2 terms, great love and worldly love, are taken from the daily liturgy. So this is how the Talmud and tractate Brachot tells us of our prayer. In our prayer, and are often used in Kabbalistic works to describe different experiences of love we have for God. Thank you. Make a blessing on water. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro.
Amen.
I'll just pull out a siddur because every now and then prayer is almost all the same in any synagogue you go to. The order of prayer, and even for the most part, the words of prayer, you go to a Sephardic synagogue or an Ashkenazic synagogue, almost all the words are the same. There's very subtle differences. They add an extra verse here. In another synagogue, maybe they'll add an extra blessing here. But for the most part, it's the same. One of the subtle variations is in the evening prayer. There's 2 blessings we do before the Shema, and that's any synagogue you go to. There's 2 blessings before the Shema, and then 1 blessing after the Shema in the evening. In the blessing, 2 blessings after the Shema in the evening. 1 blessing in the morning after the Shema, 2 blessings in the evening. In the second blessing before the Shema in the evening, it's a beautiful paragraph that talks about the relationship of love between God and the Jew. And I just wanted to bring out one subtle difference that will just speak to our point here. The words the words on page 119 of our prayer book says like this: Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amcha hafta. With everlasting love, you have loved the house of Israel, your people. In different communities, the wording at the beginning of this paragraph is either Ahavat Olam, which is in our community and our liturgy. For the most part, all over, that's one of the words. Ahavat Olam, which is translated as an everlasting. Olam can mean forever. like an everlasting love. Another wording could also be Ava Rabbah, Beit Yisrael, a great love. You have loved the Jewish people, the house of Israel. Again, a very subtle difference. Is it Avat Olam, an everlasting love, or this is on page 119, or a great love? That's going to be just so you can appreciate a little bit of the variation. The two different types of love. What the difference of liturgy is, which love are we tapping into in that blessing? Are we tapping into the lower level of love, which is going to be called Avat Olam, or higher level of love, which is Ahava Rabbah? Ahava Rabbah is the great love. It's also going to be known as the pleasurable love, and we'll see why in a moment. So let's see it inside. He starts with explaining the higher level of love, which is called Ahava Rabbah, great love. And let's see that now inside on the Kindle. It's right there on the page. If you're looking in the book, it's on 556 in the middle. Ahava Rabbah is also described as pleasurable love, which is from Song of Songs, Ahava Rabbah. You could also see it from the second Rebbe of Chassidus. Normally, you love something you don't already have. You're drawn to it and you desire it. But as we learned in chapter 9, a pleasurable love represents the joy of already being connected to God. You feel the pleasure in that love, in that. That's where in that relationship, in that connection. In this sense, it resembles the love you have for yourself. There's no passionate yearning to be drawn to something. You just quietly take pleasure in yourself. So think of it. The higher level of love is not a longing for something. It's already a pleasure. Usually a love is for something that you want, something outside of you that you're wanting to connect with. Over here, the love is already something that you have. It's being connected to God, and you're feeling a joy in that connection. It's like that love you have for yourself. It's not a passionate love for yourself because it's inside of you. It's a quiet type of love, which is pleasurable. You take pleasure in yourself, knowing that love that you have for yourself. For most things, that maybe he'll explain a little more. Pleasure is not something that you. It's not for when you love something outside of you. You want to express it. You show your love and your affection to that person with appreciation, with words, obviously. But when there's a love that's in a pleasurable state, that pleasure doesn't require loudness. It's more quiet. It's something that you have, and you're joyful in that. So let's see more inside. And great love, this Ahava Rabbah, is a flame that rises by itself. Meaning, what's a flame that rises? Meaning that it's impossible to acquire through your own efforts, and it comes only as a kind gift, as a kind of gift from above to a person who is already complete in his or her reverence of God, and they're given this as a gift. By the way, just that quote on the previous line of flame that rises on its own is actually a quote of how the Talmud explains the menorah in the temple was supposed to be kindled. That you can't just light it and let it be. You have to keep your hand supporting with a shamash, supporting the flame until its flame rises on its own, until the flame is independent and is healthy, is a strong flame. Similar to that, that menorah flame needs to be rising on its own. This love also, this pleasurable love, this great love, is a great love that rises by itself, which means it's not something that you attain with your own efforts. It's more of something that's given to you as a gift. When you already have a higher form, complete reverence, God gives you as a gift the higher form of love as well. As we learned in chapter 14, pleasurable love is not a direct achievement of human worship, but a kind of reward received from God when everything else has been perfected. To take pleasure in God in a way, thank you, Vivian, that is a foretaste of the world that is coming. Okay, cool. So let's just explain this line. Everything in our world, it comes through efforts. There's a lot of different explanations about it, but just in one word, everything we do, we merit with our efforts. Take, for example, teshuva, which is the process that we're beginning. I mean, every day is supposed to be a teshuva day, but especially as we begin Rosh Chodesh Elul, the 40 days of teshuva that begins on Rosh Chodesh Elul, all the way through Yom Kippur that we're starting this weekend. Teshuva is something that you work for, and you're able to then reap the benefits and the joy that you have in that process of teshuva. But this type of love, it only comes as a result of the work we have in attaining our yira. And that's the reward we have is the yira. But as a result of the work in attaining our process of getting closer to God, in our reverence, God gives us as a gift something that is almost undeserving, something that is beyond what we work for. And that's this type of love that is not a direct achievement of our worship, but rather a reward once we have done the job properly and fully, completely. It's God gives us a taste into something that we'll have when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, we'll have this pleasure in God that will be open for all of us. But nowadays, a level of someone who's, let's say, on this level of a tzaddik, or a Beinani that is working hard to the step and level of this yira that is complete, this higher form of yira, Hashem gives them a taste of this love, the way it's going to be available for everyone when Mashiach comes. As in the famous Hasidic insight on the teaching of our sages of blessed memory, the way of a man is to seek a woman. Where in this insight, love is indicated scripturally as male and masculine. So over there, this is more of a grammatical thing that in English you don't really appreciate, because male and female words don't really exist. When you say a friend in English, it could refer to a male or a female. When you say the word you, it could refer to a male or a female. But in Hebrew, like in many other languages, the wording of certain words could either be used in a masculine, a male term, or it could be used in a female term. But let's see the explanation on it. The way of love, the masculine, is to seek and follow after reverence, which is the feminine. So this is just a beautiful thing. In Hebrew, the word yira is a feminine word. The word ahava is a masculine word. What we see from there is that the masculine is coming after the feminine, which means the way of love follows after reverence. Once you have the reverence, you then grow from there to a higher level, which is going to be the love. Of course, there's a lower level of love that we're going to see in a moment that needs to be had before. But over here on the higher level of love follows the higher level of yira.
So you fear God first and then love God.
You have the complete fear of God comes before the complete love of God, this great love. But there's going to be obviously the lower level of yira, which is the basic component that we all have to have in order to inspire ourselves in mitzvahs that come first. And also there's going to be the basic love or the everlasting love that we're going to see in a moment. It's going to be known as the worldly love that's going to come before this higher level of yira. So just the pattern, the way we're going to be learning the pattern over here is going to be the first thing that we need to achieve and work on is the basic level of yira. Like as we began in chapter 41, that's the crucial first building block in order to build our foundation, which is the yira, the basic yira of God's authority over us, that we are servants of God. And in Hebrew, the important words were kabbalat ol, accepting upon ourselves the authorship and the yoke of heaven. Then comes the basic love that we didn't learn yet. Then comes the higher level of yira, and then will come the higher level of love. But we'll see it as we continue chapter 43, understanding it more. Scripture, the Torah hints to a connection between masculine, which is zachar, the masculine term, and love, when it states he remembers zachar, his kindness. Zachar chasto. So over here, God is referred to in the masculine, his kindness, and the word uses remember, but also zachar, which means remember, is also the Hebrew term for masculine. And scripture hints to a connection between feminine and reverence with the words, a woman God revering, which we actually say on our Friday night, from quoting from Solomon in Proverbs, before the Kiddush, we say the Eshet Chayil, the woman of excellence. And we all know that this is obviously talking about women, but talking about the divinity, the Shekhinah of God. So over here, it's referring to God in the female, a woman, which is the Shekhinah, which is what's revealed on Shabbat, the feminine side of God, the Shekhinah of God. And it's referring to the woman, the female side of God, as God revering. So Yira is related to the feminine. Ahava is going to be related to the masculine. This insight being known from Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, which was the second Hasidic Rebbe, the disciple and the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. So let's just summarize this point. The way of a man, a love, is to seek a woman, which is reverence, because again, a love is a masculine term. So when it says the way of a man, it's referring to the way of love is to seek a woman, suggests that love, man, comes to seek or seeks a person who is complete in reverence of God, which means once you have the reverence of God, then you are given this level of love. Part of it is hard because we're just reading it in the English, and this has a lot to do with the Hebrew terminology of the words that are the way they are in Hebrew. But just the general idea that we're learning from a verse that the love is given to you once the reverence is complete. Once a person has a higher level of reverence, what follows that, what seeks, what comes after that is this higher level of love. And the explanation why, without first having complete reverence, it's impossible to reach this level of great love. Why can't I just skip it and say, right now I'm in a loving mode. Let me attain the higher love without having to first go through the higher reverence. So the explanation why you have to first have complete reverence is because this great love is at the transpersonal consciousness of Atzilus. So Atzilus, if you remember from many months ago, we were learning different worlds. In the worlds that we were learning, we talked about there's a lower level of world, which is Asiya, which is the world of action. You have a higher world than that, which is the world of Yetzira, formation. We have a higher world than that, which is Bria, creation. But the highest of all worlds, the highest of the four worlds, is going to be the world of Atzilus, which is emanation. Now, Atzilus. So this level of love, of great love, Avarabba, is on this level of Atzilus. The only way to get to this level of Atzilus, you have to first go through the other ones. So a realm where there is no slicing or separation, God forbid. So to receive great love, your consciousness needs to be at the level of Atzilus through attaining higher reverence. Atzilus is not only a world that it's not a world that you fly to with a huge rocket ship, is a world that you attain through your consciousness. But the world of Atzilus that you can attain through your consciousness is a place where there's no separation between you and God at all. That's Atzilus. Atzilus, just to give you the biblical terminology, when Moshe, the first time the word Atzal or Atzil is used in the Torah is in the book of Numbers, in the Torah portion of Bahalotcha. So we read it around 2 months ago in Shul, in synagogues. Over there, Moshe prayed to God that he can't do it all himself. He needs he needs a leadership also to help. So God told him, you will lean onto the elders and they will have some of your spirit. The words in Hebrew were Vayetzal min haruach asher alav, that you will give from the spirit from within you and you will lean it onto them. This is the original source for where smicha comes from. In the olden days, smicha is actually Yaakov would know about this, smicha is the Hebrew term for rabbinical ordination. In the olden days, the way smicha would work, Smicha literally means, and some of you are familiar with this word from Ashrei and other places, somech could be translated as to support, but also to support, to like push into, to like hold up with your hands, to support. In the olden days, the way ordination was transferred, was given, was the rabbi would lean his hands, would guide and support the other rabbi, the students. And we see that from Moshe of how he gave from his spirit onto the elders, onto the other students that were being ordained at that moment. And that actually continued from generation to generation. Unfortunately, that chain was broken during the time of the Second Temple's destruction. So that doesn't exist anymore, that way of doing it. So now it's just, verbally said, I hereby declare you're a rabbi. There's, words said, yadin, yadin. But that original term for Moshe, the words were atzal, which means it's like a consciousness where there's no separation. You're giving from yourself. So to be on the point of what I'm trying to get to over here is to be on this level of atzilus, of emanation of this world of atzilus. It's a consciousness where there's no separation whatsoever. To reach this place of love, which is found in atzilus, you first need to have a consciousness that is on par with that. How do you get to that level of consciousness? It's first through absolute reverence. When you're on the level of absolute reverence, you could then transcend to a consciousness of atzilus, which is where Ahava is found. So the point that we're trying to say is you can't reach this level of Ava Rabba, without first having the complete level of Yira. Because this level of Ava is found in atzilus, and the only way to get there is through having this consciousness that is complete and whole with God, and there's no separation. The only way you can get there is through attaining higher reverence. We'll take some questions. Was there a question? No? Oh, perfect. Unlike ordinary love, which fluctuates according to the circumstances, great love, or Ahava Rabba, is a steady connection to God, which cannot be compromised by any worldly thing. To reach that level, your consciousness needs to be at the consciousness of Atzilus, at which point the physical veneer of this world is no longer able to hide God from you, right? Usually this world is hiding God from you. You don't see God open in this world. But at the level of Atzilus, you see godliness direct. There's no covering over godliness, and the consciousness of Atzilus must be acquired through reaching upper reverence. We'll take your question, Naomi.
Okay. So the first question I have in the chat box for you, Rabbi Landa, is could you please review how we maintain this level? You mentioned we can maintain the level, the lower level of awe of Hashem all throughout the day. And I know we could do a certain meditation, but we don't do that all day. So how do we maintain it?
Yeah. And you have a second question also? You want me to? Oh.
Yeah, the second question is which comes first? You had mentioned the 4 steps, and is the love of Hashem first, or is the awe of Hashem first?
So there's a good. So I'll first answer your second question because it's a quicker one. The lower reverence comes first.
Oh, okay.
And then the lower love. But we didn't really get to the lower love yet. So it starts with the lower level of reverence. That's the basics. That's something we each need in order to motivate ourselves in Torah and mitzvot to do it right and authentically. And then you could get to the lower love, and then you get to the higher reverence, and then you get to the higher love. But yeah. And to answer your first question, let me just pull it up, actually. Hold on 1 second. I just want to get there was a beautiful practical lesson. I can't find the practical lesson right now, but that's fine. I'll just tell you in short, in chapter 42, it might be on 540, but in chapter 42, we were explaining that you have to tap into a level within you called das. Das is that level of applying not just the knowledge, but recognizing the godliness within you, recognizing the Torah that we're studying and making it personalized, making it yours. Whenever we're studying, and really the meditation we're supposed to have is, how is this related to me? Each one of us have this das ability in us, bequeathed to us from Moshe. And we explained that we each have a Moshe spark inside of our soul. Here, so the practical lesson of 541, he said, if you start your day, I'm just going to read to you the practical lesson. I think it was very important. Meditating on the fact that God is watching you will help you to have the most basic level of reverence necessary to observe the Torah. Meditating that God is watching. If you do this meditation in the morning, you can refresh it quickly later in the day when temptation comes your way, to remind yourself that God is watching. So again, I was looking for that practical lesson. So that was on 541. If you want to have a snapshot of that. And if you want to have what the meditation was, you have to go back to the beginning of chapter 41, where it went through the process of that meditation. Okay, we are, and yes, Lynn.
Yes, so this is so interesting. I'm looking at a Siddur, Kol HaNeshama, and they have the Ahava Rabbah.
Oh, cool.
And in looking at it, one of the things, they have like a meditation saying that this is the time where you gather the four corners of the talit to gather all your scattered thoughts and focus on unity, of people, of, just all the parts of our lives, to bring it all together in our unity. And then from that speak the Shema. And it's just, it's talking about trying to unite your heart and the hearts of the people to Hashem. So could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I'm so curious, because just the meditation you just said, which is a beautiful one, gathering the scattered thoughts in our mind and unity amongst the people, all that, the way we're going to be explaining it in a moment in the next section, is really related to the basic level of love. Avat olam, love from literally the word olam would mean world. We're translating it in the prayer book as everlasting, because the word olam could also mean forever. Like in the Ashrei, we say, Me'ata ve'ad olam hallelujah. From now on forever, I give praise to God. But the word olam literally means world. The olam hazeh, we're in this world. You have olam haba, the future world, the next world, the world to come. Olam means world. So this love on the basic level will come from worldly things, meditating on the blessings you have in life. And I'm not going to go through the meditation yet, because we're going to get to it in the next section. But that's why, for me, the Ava Rabbah or Avat Olam, it's beautiful to see the difference, and why, in the liturgy book, the way we have it, Avat Olam fits into the meditation, the way you just explained it. So which part did you want me to address? Just the Ava Rabbah part, or the Avat Olam?
Right. It seemed more about Ahava Olam instead of Ahava Rabbah, that you were so connected with God. This was like more about what was going on around you and bringing those pieces together. So maybe they interchanged the name. I don't know. I was just a little confused when I was looking at the Abounding Love. They had a different take on it. So I just wanted to hear from you. So thank you.
Yeah. So Abounding Love would be that Ava Rabbah, that enormous love, that great love. Whereas in our liturgy prayer book, it's Avat Olam. And either one is fine. I mean, as long as the prayer book is from an authentic source, which means handed down from generation to generation from the sages. I mean, it started with Anshe Knesset Agdola, the members of the Great Assembly. So think of Mordechai HaTzadik that led the Jews with Esther in the times of Shushan, the times of Purim. Those were the people that put together the basic structure of our prayer book. So, nowadays prayer is not just composed by anyone who's in the mood. Obviously, we could do our own prayer, but the words of the prayer book itself is extremely perfect and pristine. For example, in one of the prayers of the Amida, there is 27 words in a prayer of healing. Rifa'enu Hashem is praying to God for healing. There's 27 words. There's a specific reason why it's 27 words that we say in that paragraph, how it's related to healing. Or for example, in the Ashrei that we say, composed by King David, Tila le David, that we say, there's 21 verses because it's invoking a certain name of God that equals 21. The name of God called Eke. And that's the relationship of God taken from this his seat of judgment, asking him to show compassion on his people. And at that point of prayer, that's the name of God that we're trying to invoke. And therefore, there's 21 verses. So everything is so perfect. So as long as it's from an authentic source that was able to tap into the artist, the beautiful art of what prayer is, then it's beautiful. So Avat Olam or Avat Rabbah, depending on the source, the prayer book that was passed down through Chabad was taken from the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, who's one of the masters of Kabbalah, and many of you are familiar with him. And most of our teaching is based on the Zohar and the Arizal, right? The fundamental teaching that there's two souls is coming from the teachings of the Arizal that's quoted in chapter 1 of Tanya here. So, like literally on the front page of the Siddur, it says, based on the Nusach of the Arizal. And then the Alter Rebbe took from the Arizal Siddur and added a few points and made it what's called Tilat Hashem, the Siddur that we use. So every liturgy, we're not going to get too much into it, but whatever liturgy, by the way, a person prays in, they have to pray in that way. So whether a person prays in a Sephardic style, with a Sephardic nusach, it's called. I guess nusach I would translate as version of his prayer. They're not able to just quickly switch to another nusach because you're committed to a certain nusach. That's the way you pray. So that's why it's interesting when people come here and they have a different nusach, like we have, Israelis that pray with a Sephardic nusach. A lot of times they would either bring their own siddur or leave their nusach, their siddur here, even though it's slight variations, but they want to make sure they're saying it the way they were taught and trained, because it's not so easy to swap nuschaot, swap prayer book liturgy. Okay, let's try to see if we could squeeze in. That takes us to section 4. I would love to at least have a taste into what the basic level of love is. Section 4, worldly love. It looks like I missed the practical lesson, so let's just say that one first. Practical lesson. Love of God also has 2 levels. The higher Ava, Rabbah, which is great love, is a pleasurable love, the joy of already being connected to God. Ava Rabbah can be earned and will come only as a gift from above to a person who is already complete in his or her reverence of God. But now let's get to practical, the Avas Olam, which is worldly love. However, the lower level of worldly love can be acquired through your efforts. It's not a gift from God. And it doesn't require you to reach higher reverence, the consciousness of Atzilus first. So the worldly love, this Avas Olam, is a love that is for me and for you, attainable and at our disposal to attain. Worldly love is, as its name suggests, is the longing for God that you can acquire through your knowledge of the world. It is also called worldly love because anyone in the world can merit it if he chooses. So it's called Avat Olam, which literally means a love in the world or a worldly love, because number 1, let's start with number 2, it's a love that's accessible for the entire world, which means everyone can attain this level of love. And also because it's a longing for God that comes through your ability, your knowledge in the world, through your understanding of the world. It builds and leads you to this level of love. Let's see what that means. Worldly love results from meditating on the greatness of the blessed infinite light as it can be known through the world, using your bina and das. So through worldly things, you come to an expression and a feeling of love of God. Unlike the above higher reverence meditation, when you use your chachma to directly see and perceive an otherworldly truth, here you use your bina and das, beginning with reality as they know it and continuing from there. So over here, it's not using your chachma that you have to use with your cognitive eyes. Over here, it's using your bina and das, which is your ability to understand reality, and you build it on it from there. Bina gradually discerns one thing from another in logical steps. The physical world exists through God, which means that God's creative energy must be everywhere. So that's a logical step. And Das then decides whether Bina's conclusions are true and real for you. So you start with Bina, which is the logic that if you have the meditation, that this whole world is from God and exists through God, then that means godliness, God's energy is everywhere. That's Bina. Comes along Das, and that applies it to me. If that's true, if that's the logical steps, the conclusion that you come to after Bina leads for you to feel this is real to me, this is true. That's Das. The two approaches, which is either Chachma and Bina, and there we go. The two approaches, either Chachma and Bina Das. Let me just clear the screen. Sorry, guys. Clear all drawings. There we go. That should be better. The two approaches, which are either Chachma and Bina and Das, each have their own strength. So each one have something that doesn't have in the other. Chachma, which is that perception of what's beyond you. Chachma is that perception of perceiving the reality of God within creation. Enables you to perceive a truth which is completely beyond and incompatible with your existence, leading to the identity dissolving experience of higher reverence, where it's almost you dissolve of your own identity to be able to connect with God's. Bina and Das, on the other hand, connect more with your ego and animal soul. So they bring you to love God, since love is an emotion which expresses ego and self, and you feel it more passionately and physically. That's why the result of Bina and Das meditation is called worldly love, because A, it uses a worldly or egoic part of your psyche, Bina and Das, and B, the meditation begins with and is anchored in worldly phenomena. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to save this topic of worldly love, of the lower level of love, really for next week. But I wanted to get you into a taste of what the love is like. Let me read the practical lesson before I forget, and then I want to summarize the two levels of love the way we've discussed it. The lower level of Avas Olam, or worldly love, can be acquired through meditating on how God is the source of all pleasures and he transcends them. So let's just summarize. You have a higher level of love, which is really only a gift that is given from above. It's once a person has complete reverence, they are then able to be on a higher level of love called Ava Rabba, which is a love that is already feeling that connection to God. Avas Olam, which is a worldly love, literally it would mean also an everlasting love, but Olam could mean world. So with the way we're understanding it is a love that comes from worldly understanding and seeing the worldly phenomena. And it's also a love that could be experienced by everyone in the world. What does that mean? When you meditate that everything in this world is coming from God, and he is the source of all of the pleasures we have in the world, and yet God transcends them all, it brings you to a longing to want to be connected to that, to want to cleave with God. But that's a place of a love that's coming from a longing, understanding, and through using your Bina, your logic that everything in this world is from God. That leads you to a Das that's saying, I want that for me to be connected with this source of love, with God. When you come to that level, you need to use your ability to think in order to experience this level. And that's going to be using your Bina and your Das. And that's why it's called the worldly love, because it has to come from your worldly part or your egoic part. So we're not fully explaining it, but just in short, you have a lower level of love, which is called Avas Olam. And it's called the worldly love because it comes from worldly phenomena. It's from understanding everything from around you and using your Bina to your Das, which is the logic that if everything is from God, I want to cleave to that. And therefore, it's using your process of thinking in order to reach that level. That's a lower level of love. Very important. And for all of us, this is the love that resonates with us the most. When we talk about loving God, like in the Shema, we say, "V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha." You shall love God, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Is referring to this one, right? Because this is a command for us to meditate on this in order to develop this love. The higher level of love, we were told, it's given as a gift. So we have to work on getting there through higher reverence, but ultimately it's going to be a gift from God and really a foretaste of what's to come when Mashiach comes. But this lower level of love, we're making it sound like small, but really this is the main level. This is the main love. Similar to the main reverence is the lower level of reverence, the basic reverence. Okay, so we're really going to talk about it more next week. God willing, next week is going to be an important class, really getting to this powerful love, this Avat Olam that is really meant for me and for you. Okay, I think it's one or two more classes in chapter 43. So we're covering some great ground. And all right, we'll wish everyone a great day.
Thank you.
And all right, shalom, everyone.
Shalom. Thank you. Tada rabah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Ron. Take care, everyone.